With the popularization of digital art nowadays, many artists began to invest in the hobby. However, digital art and graphic design is an expensive one. In order for the drawing experience to be smooth and comfortable, digital artists may find themselves investing in good supplies, such as a fast computer, HD quality monitor, and a drawing tablet with a good response time. All these devices have many uses, but are also terribly expensive, ranging from $100 to $1,000, and more in the case of a computer. Normally, a drawing program is in that list of expensive for the hobby, but with them becoming so popular, there are plenty of free alternatives out there. I've tried many to find the best one, and eventually settled on Krita as my main favorite. Here, I'll go through the basic setup of the program, and you can decide for yourself if it. Here are just a couple of the programs that I've downloaded on my computer. These include Metabang, Krita, Paint, FilePacker, Sketchbook, Artweaver Free, and there's so many. Also, with a simple Google search, there's a lot of programs and alternatives out there. So let's get started. As far as your tools, you've got your classic brush, which there's more of. You've got your lines, your paint bucket, squares, and also a decent text tool, which is interesting because normally for programs, a text tool is pretty hard to find. There's fonts and sizes, and it's pretty cool for graphic design. This is your new document little button in the corner. This is a staple for any art program, of course. And once you click on it, this menu pops up in a separate tab. You've got your width, length, and resolution. You've also got basic textures. You can also create images from clipboard. And they also have lots of templates, such as animation templates, comic templates, design templates, DSLR, texture. There's the color settings, and this is very detailed and a bit better than I normally see with free programs, so they're very interesting. Then we have the files where you can open a work in progress, or you can just click a new one if you have an image that you would like to pop up for reference. This is just open up the normal file spot on your computer, and you can just select whatever tab. Krita also has its own saving spot where it'll preserve layers, and here you have your undo and redo buttons. Just like any program, undo is also with Control Z. But if you don't want to find yourself doing a finger spasm whenever you need to undo a line, you can just move your mouse up and click those spots. Are your gradient and texture tools. These normally are very uncommon to be up there with your main selection menus, but normally they're hidden away in the side, just like every other program. On the gradient icon. They have a bunch of weird ones that I'm not sure what the point of is, like this weird stripy one. But they work pretty well if you ever need a gradient. They also have a bunch of textures. I really don't enjoy using textures, pre-made textures in my digital art. But if you're one of those people that really enjoys using them, I definitely recommend to give it a go because they have a whole lot. This is your color switcher. This is a staple of any art program. Basically, just click to colors. Normally, there's a specific color or black and white. But you can set it to whatever you want. They have a couple swatches there and a color wheel if you would be interested in that. The brush presets. This is in if you'd like to create a new brush or if you'd like to edit your current brush. Just use that very fine line, basic line art kind of brush. And I don't change it too much. I more stick with the original sets they have. But they're pretty decent. They also have a bunch of these weird textures that you can do, which I have not really worked with before. But they also have this weird, not really weird, but they also have this swatching place, which is not very common with these places. So you can figure out your brush presets just the way you like them without having to click in and out of that menu, which I think is a feature that common programs like Photoshop and Paint Tool Sci could really benefit from. It's a very good feature to the program, and I think it adds those features that really make up a good drawing program. On the side, you've got all your different selections and changing the brushes up, but I really tend to just keep with the regular ones. Here you have all your different types of brushes that are pre-made. They've got really weird shapes and painted, but towards the top you have just the basic brushes that every digital artist needs. You got an airbrush, your classic lineup brush, sketching. They also have a couple erasers, but you'll see later that if you click E, any brush will be turned into an eraser in that shape. I'm not sure if you can do this with other programs, but I think it's a very nice touch. I also set more brushes down there because I constantly switch between them. Those are your quick switches. The first one is a little eraser. You can also quickly switch from brush to eraser by clicking E. It's not very common with drawing programs, but once you get used to it, it works pretty well. You also have that little, I don't know what to call that, but it basically just locks the brushes you've made, and it's like you can color inside the lines, literally. And then you have this, which I'm not sure what to call it, but basically if you adjust the opacity or the size of your brush, once you click it, it'll just revert back to the original way that brush came. It's pretty nice if you're changing things up constantly and you just want to go back to a nice line art tool. In the top middle, you have your quick brush settings. These are just temporary changes you'll make to the brush. Whether you need a smaller brush on full opacity to go in with some very intricate details, or you need a larger brush with a smaller opacity just for some simple shading. These will not permanently alter your brush, just like the other brush settings were. And by clicking the other revert tool, you can just go back to the basic settings that they were put as. Basically, you can change these around constantly, and they're not going to change the integrity of the brush. Then you have your mirror tools. The weird part about this program is that normally when you have mirror tools, they're in just that tool selection on the left-hand side. But now up here, they're in the top as if you would be using them constantly. For the basic art that I do, I don't really use them much. They're fun to play around with, but they're not very useful. I think I've used them once or twice to draw one eye and then have the other one identical. But for the most part, I really don't use them. You have a horizontal one and a vertical one that can be moved around. And you can also put two at the same time, which you can make these weird shapes with. Overall, they're not very useful in general, but they're fun to play around with, and if you're into that kind of stuff, then you definitely have these tools. Then you have your color selector, or color picker. This is a very basic one where there's the triangle, which is light, dark, grayscale, saturation, all of that stuff, and also a round circle around it that has all the colors in order. I'm not sure if the program originally comes with it in that top right hand corner, but you can move around all the tabs very easily, and this is just my current setup. You also have your tool options. I don't know why I tucked it into this little corner. I really don't use tool options very much, but if you want to experiment with that, you can feel free to go ahead. You also have your navigator. They call this a overview in Krita, but in all the other programs it's called a navigator. That's basically just what it is. If you're zoomed in on little details, then you can see the total piece. You also have your layers. You've got your layer opacity. You can make new layers, also see them or not see them like that. They're very basic. If a program doesn't have layers, then I would basically just say ditch it. Layers are a very, very key part of digital art. They also have a couple spaces where you can lock them or basically create like a momentary clipping layer where basically it locks and you can't draw outside the lines. You can also make copies of a layer, make new layers, group layers, clone layer, vector layers, if you really want to experiment with that. You can also make folders and name your layers by double tapping on it. You can also set the color of the layer if you're into that. If you're working on a big art piece where you really need to just work on keeping layers in groups, then coloring them is a good option. So yeah, as you've seen, I've tested out so many, and Krita just has the basics. And if it's something that, if you really see all these tools and you think that the Krita would be a very, very good option for you, then I would highly recommend Krita. It has all the basic tools and supplies that you'll need, and it's free. It highly compares to something like Sci or Photoshop, and it's for 0% of the price, I guess. That's very important when you're buying tablets and monitors and all of that other stuff for a computer. It's just so important that you have a good drawing program, and if it's free, then it'll be so easy just to pick up the program and work with it, and it's just a very all-around pleasant experience to work with such a nice program, especially when it's free. As you see here, Photoshop is $240, Clip Manga Studio is $170, and Paint Tool Sci is $45. And don't get me wrong, these are all amazing programs with their own perks and good uses. But when you're investing in starting a new hobby like this, definitely use Krita. And if you're not too satisfied with Krita, then I would recommend trying out Photoshop or Paint Tool Sci. But when you're starting out a hobby such as digital art, which is so strange and not at all close to traditional art, Krita is such a good all-round program just to get accustomed to the medium and really work to get better. So if all the tools and options really stick out to you about Krita, I would highly recommend trying it out.